Hey guys, welcome to another GameXplain discussion. I'm your host, Andre Sigers, and we're again joined by Derek Binner to discuss all the latest news of Smash Bros. Wii U and 3DS from this past week. So let's get right into it. Alright, Derek, well, after the confirmation that Diddy was coming back last week, it's kind of hard to top, character unveilings like that, or, confirmations that characters are returning. But with that said, this week was pretty decent. Now, there wasn't anything huge on the surface, but I think there was actually a little bit more to it than might seem at first glance. But we'll start off with Monday's screenshot, which isn't terribly exciting, but it does give us a little bit more information on Diddy. And this time we can see that, we already knew that his recovery, being the twin rocket barrels, were coming back. But Sakurai elaborates a little bit that they will now be able to launch along a more horizontal trajectory. Which I think is a good change, because Diddy was always kind of a little bit tricky to use before, in my opinion, because his recovery was so, it was so upward focused. You basically shot straight up, you could only, move it to the side a little bit. Mm-hmm. So I think this is a promising change. What do you think?
No, I think so too. It's nice to see that, we always talk about how the returning characters aren't getting changed much, but they are being tweaked. And this is just another example of one of those tweaks. And I think it's good. I think it's interesting they're giving him a little bit more horizontal momentum and try to help improve his recovery. I guess because, especially since, like before, they can be knocked off if somebody hits a mid-boost. So Diddy always has one of the more tricky recoveries because of that.
Yeah, and having, any kind of, having more control over where you're going is definitely going to be useful for avoiding just being taken out like that. So I wonder if they're changing him in any other ways in terms of his recovery. Because one of the big things, as well, was that you actually had to charge it up to get the full recovery distance. And while I'm guessing that's still going to be the case, I'm wondering if they're going to tweak the timing of that at all. Whether you'll be able to charge it, maybe, whether it's quicker now, or whether the amount of charge it has maybe dictates how far to the side you go. I'm guessing that is going to be handled mostly by the control stick, but I wonder if that will be a factor as well.
It very well could be. It's difficult to say just from these pictures alone. But I think we can maybe expect a little bit quicker timing, just because of if they're increasing the overall speed of the gameplay, somewhere striking a balance between melee and brawl, you'd have to expect some of these moves would be quickened as well to accommodate that sort of speed.
And it looks like it'll still be able to be used offensively as well, of course, where we can see, Lil Mac and the Villager getting their... they look like they're on fire, actually. Just
a little.
Yeah, I'm guessing they got hit by Diddy and are being, repelled by it.
And it does go back to a little bit with what we said in our Little Mac analysis, where we mentioned how we sort of saw him shrugging off some minor attacks, and I guess this is the first time I've seen him actually react to an attack.
So he's not invincible.
Yes, exactly. So, something along the lines of Diddy's upward blast that will affect Little Mac and send him flying. So good.
It'd be awesome if that's the only move in the game that can actually damage Little Mac or actually cause him to have knockback.
That'd be scary.
Alright, well, moving on to the next screenshot. This one's I kind of like, only because it verifies a theory I brought up last week, I believe, based on the pictures of Diddy, where we saw, the same arena, but with and without the Punch-Out theme. So, we now know for sure that there are actually going to be two versions of this arena. The generic Smash Bros. Version, and of course the Punch-Out one. Now, I theorized last week that it might be dependent on whether Lil Mac's in the fight, similar to how the Spirit Tracks arena changes depending on whether Toon Link's fighting in the match or not. But, looking at the first screenshot where we can see the generic arena, it's only Mario and Bowser here, unless Lil Mac's somewhere off screen. Although I don't think that's the case, because on the TV we can see, the whole arena, presumably, and Lil Mac's nowhere to be found unless it's just gone knocked out and then timed it right. So it's seeming like that this will be a random selection. Kind of like, I guess, a Mushroomy Kingdom from Brawl, where you would either be above ground or below ground, except this time it's purely cosmetic as far as we can tell.
Yeah, it definitely seems that bit. That's the first thing I noticed, is because I didn't think they were going to do this change. I thought it was just like an older build, but you were insistent that this was brand new, and turns out you were right. But going along with that, we thought it was very much connected to Little Mac, and this pretty much definitively proves in my mind that it isn't. It's just purely cosmetic that changes from time to time. And I'm trying to figure out what makes this stage so special, and the only thing I can come up with is actually with his caption for the second picture, where it shows the Punch-Out screen between King Dedenne and Kirby, and he mentions King Dedenne really likes fighting in the ring, doesn't he? Mm-hmm. So this might actually serve as a dual purpose for both King Dedenne and Little Mac, because King Dedenne's final fight in the original Dreamland was in a boxing ring.
Right. That's definitely true, and I wonder if that at least wasn't the inspiration behind having him in that picture. But, the boxing ring he was in was definitely a lot more stylized than either of the ones here. So I don't know if they're explicitly going for that reference, unless there's like a third version of the arena, hiding out in the game, that is more themed to King Dedenne.
I'd be down for that.
Yeah, that'd be pretty cool.
Having all the little Kirby enemies in the background, yeah, that'd be cool.
So do you still think, though, that this is kind of pointless? Because your big argument last time was that it seemed pointless to have, a more, have a themed arena than a generic version of that arena. So what are your thoughts on this now?
I guess when I seeing it confirmed, I'm sort of like, okay, whatever. It's, they decided to go for it. I still think it's kind of pointless because I don't really see the advantages here and there. But we've never actually seen this stage fully in action, so maybe there's some surprises here that we're just not aware of in some way that makes it maybe less pointless.
So I'm wondering at this point if there's actually more to the Punch-Out version of the arena than we know right now. Like, what if there actually are stage hazards that involve, like, say, the other boxers from Punch-Out Wii appearing in the game? And what if, like, if there is an option to turn off stage hazards, what if it then reverts to the generic Smash arena, where, nothing in effect happens?
That would be very interesting, actually. We haven't seen any indication of that whatsoever. But it would be... I'd love to see the other boxers come back in some way. Like we mentioned, as soon as Little Mac was confirmed that maybe somebody else was going to be taking his position as an assist trophy, which obviously the choice was King Hippo. Mm-hmm. But I'd love to see the other... the Punch-Out characters have so much, character that it'd be a shame not to see them really to be... get taken advantage of. So I don't know if your idea is true or not, but I'd certainly love to see it implemented that way. And it, to see them take the whole idea of, okay, we'll make our own generic version of our own stages for the more competitive scene. There's all good stuff in there. I like the idea of all of it, honestly.
Now, you said there's no sign of having other wrestlers here at all. Is that actually the case, though? Because in your own analysis, you pointed out the posters of the other wrestlers in the the other boxers in the background, right?
Yes, but that was in a cutscene, and since watching Punch-Out, the Punch-Out Wii, those exact same posters that were in the Punch-Out Wii cutscene during the training montages were there as well. So that's just references to that game. I highly doubt it's, these are the characters that's popping up, especially since it was just cutscenes.
Yeah, I don't know, man. Knowing Sakurai, I would not put anything past him. No, at the very least, this really does show just how much they're putting into this game. Like the fact that there are two, versions of this arena for no apparent reason that we know of. Unless they do go, that route, which having the stage hazards option and it reverting to a generic version if not. And I wonder if that is the case, then they might do something like that for other arenas.
Yeah, it'd be very interesting to see this if they do have that option. And we've sort of seen that before, where sometimes the Dr. Wily stage will have platforms moving around and stuff, or the Yellow Devil, and other times we see it and there's just nothing there. So we don't know whether it's phasing in or not, or perhaps this is just another sign of being able to turn stage hazards off.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, and they, it does seem like they are changing some things up in the game, especially in reaction to fan reactions. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it'll be very curious to see what if there actually is more here than seems at first glance, or at second glance, I should say. All right, and speaking of first glance, actually, let's move on to Wednesday's screenshot, which shows off Fox kicking Samus. Now, that in and of itself isn't very interesting. What is interesting, however, is what Sakurai says about the picture. where he says that now consecutive standard attacks will always transition to a finishing move. So this is Fox's finishing kick after a standard combo attack. So at first this didn't seem like, it didn't seem like anything major to me. What it means is they're getting rid of the repetitive attacks you could do in Brawl, where if you either, I think if you either held A or you just kept tapping A, your character could enter into an infinite attack, where they would just keep repeating the same animation and, made them, pretty hard to get at from the front at least. So what they're doing is they're doing away with that. And what they're doing now is they're basically giving all these characters that had infinite moves before, basically a new move. Now granted, probably not a big one, it's just a finisher, but that is still going to be, a fair amount of characters getting a new addition in some form to their moveset, which I think is pretty cool.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's all about the balancing in this case, because the way they did before with, I believe they had these same sort of options in Melee, of course, but I can't remember if it had the same thing in Brawl, where as you kept using that attack, it would decrease in how much damage it actually did.
Right, any attack you used over and over would decrease in damage.
Exactly, and so rather than do that method now, they have this finishing attack, so who knows how long they go, but I think we have a slight idea just how long these go, thanks once again to the Little Mac trailer, because I was analyzing that, I was looking at his moveset, and it seemed like he transitioned from one of those multi-hit attacks smoothly into another type. And looking back at that now, it's very obvious that was his finisher.
What's cool about this is it does mean that the characters that we've seen already that are returning, are being changed, and that includes, characters like Diddy, Pikachu, and Kirby, I believe, and several others, plus others that presumably are going to be coming back, but haven't been confirmed yet, like Game & Watch. Mm-hmm. So now I'm curious as to why they're making this change. And I think part of it, and I think my hint is something even bigger, is that I believe in Brawl, at least in the tournament scene, and probably on lower levels too, but a bigger problem in the tournament scene is you could use those attacks to basically corner opponents. You just keep using an attack and they get stuck there. Whereas now I'm guessing these finisher moves, I'm presuming would have, I think two things about them. One, it's going to cause a delay before your next attack, of course, at least more so than the infinite attack does. And two, it might be more powerful in that, whether in damage delivered or in KO, you're knocking your opponent further back, making it much harder to get them trapped against a wall or something. And
I think it's a little bit of both. Probably more so the second one, because looking at Fox's kick here, we can see the size of his boot is a lot bigger on that foot than the other foot.
You're right. I didn't even realize that. It's going right through Samus.
Exactly. It's just like with Diddy Kong and his giant fist from last week, which indicates that this is a stronger version of that attack.
Right.
So it is a much bigger move hitting Samus in this case. So yeah, it'll be very interesting to see how much it changes up, because one of my favorite characters to play as is Fox. So I didn't use that move a whole lot, but it did come in handy a lot of times. So I'm very curious to see how much it would change up my game.
Now, I'm also wondering if part of the reason for getting rid of it is due to the thing I just mentioned, getting them stuck up against a wall or something. Do you think that could mean that infinite specials might be gone as well? I can't think of too many offhand. I'm thinking specifically of Pit, where he spun that weapon of his, and he could both inflict damage and deflect basically anything. So I'm wondering if that might be gone too. I mean, we've already seen one of his specials has been changed. So I'm wondering if they're going to get rid of those infinite, specials as well.
And maybe not get rid of, but maybe add a finishing move like before. And once again, maybe they could just keep that whole Brawl mentality there, where you just have it decrease in how much value it actually have. The thing with the Pit special, if I remember correctly, is that eventually it would bounce you back enough that you wouldn't get stuck. I remember very few instances where I got stuck by somebody using that attack as Pit. Yeah, I mean, I guess, would you consider as far as another infinite attack would be Fox's laser?
I was actually thinking the same thing. That one's weird, because that one's actually changed a lot since the original Smash. In the original Smash, there's a huge delay between
shots.
Yeah, and that delay's been greatly reduced.
Yeah, but it also has no stopping power now.
I guess no, because it doesn't have any stopping power. It's basically like the opposite of Little, or I guess it is to everyone as most moves are to Little Mac. To do a really strained analogy.
Yeah, it's such a simple picture, but there is a lot of repercussions that could come from this.
Yeah, it's cool again to see. I said this last time that Sakurai said something about a gameplay change. What doesn't seem exciting at first actually might be some of the biggest things he's announced, and I think this is gonna be one of them. This is really cool to see, and I am excited to see how this will not only change the characters but change some aspect of the game. All right, well, moving on to Thursday, there is one aspect of the game we can see hasn't changed. And that is Waluigi is coming back as as an assist trophy, unfortunately, to the dismay of some, I believe. And Sakurai even has fun with this by saying, once again, Waluigi's assist trophy joins the collection, which also means he's not a playable character. Just because you try hard doesn't mean you'll make it into the battle. It really sounds like he's not only like knocking Waluigi here, but he's kind of knocking people who well, not really knocking, but like playing with people who might have been hoping for Waluigi to come here. Now myself, I actually like Waluigi. I went from not liking Waluigi at all originally to kind of loving the guy because he is like such a weirdo creep character now, and because before he just seemed like a pretty generic character that just because Wario needed a partner in Mario Tennis at the time, and it kind of turned him into still kind of very similar, but kind of his own thing too, where in every game he does weird things, whether it's in Mario Tennis for the GameCube, where he's like swimming around to get to the ball, or in Mario Strikers, which might be his best appearance yet, where he's giving the suck it sign for each goal, which might be the most inappropriate thing in a Mario game ever. So I mean, it's cool to see him. I'm glad that he's back in this game. It's unfortunately he's not a playable character. I personally don't care that much, because he's not that important to the Mario games. No. He hasn't had his own starring role at all.
I believe the only game he was actually the villain of was the main villain was that Dance Dance Revolution Mario mix.
Oh yeah, I guess that's the closest thing, huh?
But yeah, I'm pretty much the same way with Waluigi. I first thought he was a stupid character, then just the more you see him and see what they did with him, he's become so strange, so weird that he's just kind of lovable in a way.
Right.
And, he's just kind of fun. And while it would be cool to see Waluigi appear as a playable character, it's not a necessity in my mind. I mean, we already have plenty of Mario characters in this game. Mm-hmm. We don't need another. He's fine just being an assist trophy. Maybe they'll give him some sort of weird animation. Who knows?
Well, but that's probably the biggest disappointment to me. Just by him not being a character, because I think there is a lot of potential in how they can make him move. Like Sakurai with Brawl in his daily updates made a big deal about, as I recall, Wario and Diddy and how they moved. Because they do have unique running and moving animations. And I think they could at least match, if not greatly top, either of those characters with Waluigi. Just going all out. Because he is basically a fresh slate in terms of how you can portray him in Brawl. Or, I'm sorry, in the new Smash Brothers game. And I think they could do some really cool things with him. But, again, they can convey some of that in his assist trophy animation. Now, real quick, it looks like he's holding his tennis racket here, just like he did in Brawl. But it almost looks like a screwdriver or something here. It almost looks like he's he's crazed right now.
Yeah, there's a very odd angle on that thing right now, because it almost looks more like a baseball bat or a baton.
Right. He's gonna beat some plumbers.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe that's why Mario's hanging off the edge and hiding. But yeah, it's very odd. I think it's definitely a tennis racket. It has to be. Yeah, it's a reference to his original appearance.
Exactly. No, the weird thing is I went back and actually looked at the assist trophy for Brawl before doing this, and unless he has multiple animations, which I honestly can't recall, he didn't use his tennis racket at all. I mean, he held it, but he would just run up and kick you into the ground. So I don't know if he's going to use his tennis racket here, or he just holds it just so there's some tie into a game he's been in.
Yeah, maybe. I got nothing.
Alright, now speaking of characters that have appeared in games before, the final screenshot of the week, being from Friday, shows off a new Pokemon, being, how do you even say this? Dedenne?
Dedenne. I believe it's called Dedenne. I
Okay.
don't have an official name on that, and I'm sure the Pokemon fans will, the really hardcore ones will get on me for that, but I assume it's pronounced Dedenne. We've seen a few Pokemon before, like the last Pokemon we saw announced for, it's coming out of Pokeballs was Palkia. This is the first. This is one of the first. It's been a while, but I think this might be our first non-legendary Pokemon announced to come out of the Pokeball, and it's interesting to see that it is an X and Y game, X and Y Pokemon to come out. Whether or not we'll see many more from that game, I'm not sure. It's hard to say which ones they'll think are, more notable than others, but I can't name the move that Dedenne is using here, but if I had to take a guess, it's probably Discharge. So if I had to guess at Lightning Attack, it probably almost goes in a circular form around him, but who knows? It's from here it just looks like an X, but it wouldn't surprise me if it kind of rotates as well.
I almost wonder too if the fact that they are having X and Y Pokemon here, which is cool, because it is a recent game. I wonder if that increases the odds of us having a true playable Pokemon character from that series, or sorry, from that generation.
I kind of doubt it, because I'm once again trying to think of new Pokemon from X and Y that would sort of work, and the only way I can think of it is if they decided to have Pokemon Trainer come back and instead use all the new Pokemon introduced for that game, which would be interesting and cool, but you don't really know. As far as standalone Pokemon, not quite. As far as other Pokemon I'd like to see from X and Y show up in Pokeball form, probably the one I'd like to see most is Honedge, which is that sword Pokemon.
Right.
Who knows? There's 700 odd Pokemon that he can choose from, so who knows what they're going to go for. It's not even worth debating what they're going to do there.
Yeah.
It's that to me, that's a pure wait and see as far as which Pokemon are coming back.
Exactly. Now, speaking of choosing, having a lot of things to choose from, I actually want to go back to the Waluigi picture real quick, if only used as a springboard for one more point. And that is, Sakurai here, as I mentioned, kind of plays off. It seems like he's playing off our expectations for this game. Some people wanted Waluigi. It's like he's almost like addressing us directly. And he did this before too. A couple of times it seems. Like with the Palutena, with the supposed Palutena leak, and then immediately the day after, having a Palutena picture, being this in statue form. And last week we had the picture of from the Nintendogs arena. With the Nintendog, being giant compared to small characters, and he explicitly mentioned then, how out of scale they seemed, or rather, how scale is not playing a serious factor in this game. So a lot of people picked up on that, on the fact that because it seems like he is so often addressing fans directly, and the fact that he mentioned the scale thing. A lot of people mentioned in our comments last week that could be a hint that maybe Ridley will be in this game as a playable character. Because one of the big things about Ridley, as we've seen in our own comments in our videos, when we mentioned Ridley, maybe being a playable character, is that he's so big, that a lot of people think it won't make sense. Even though you can say that about a lot of characters, like Bowser being huge, as we've discussed, and
that and Olimar only being like an inch tall or something.
Right,
like that.
Exactly. And so Sakurai flat out saying himself that scale doesn't matter. That he's not staying true to that. Maybe
it's an approximation.
Exactly, right. So I thought that was just pretty interesting. I wanted to touch on that real quick. Just, maybe with the fact that, between what we see of him this week addressing the audience, maybe he is kind of hinting at Ridley being here. But then again, he could be trolling all of us. And
it's entirely possible.
It is. It totally is.
Yeah, I'd love to see, if it is true that he's playing with us and has that in his pocket, I'd love to see Ridley. I've wanted to see Ridley since the second game. So, yeah, please bring him in.
I totally agree. Alright, well, I think that wraps it up for our Smash Brothers discussion this week. We covered a lot, I think. So, thanks guys for watching. If you like this discussion, make sure to follow us and like us on Facebook and Twitter at GameXplain. You can find links to them in the description below. Post all kinds of things there. It's a good way to keep up to date with everything we post. And of course, keep an eye on GameXplain.com for more Smash Brothers Wii U and 3DS and other things gaming as well. Alright, thanks for watching, guys. Bye.